If you've ever bought a counterfeit optic, whether it be intentionally or unintentionally, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Guys, like and comment. Comment section is out of control. YouTube does not like you. However, I do, but I am severely disappointed at times. Be yourselves. I will venture in there and clap back whenever necessary. Guys, if you are looking to support the channel, the biggest supporter of the channel right now is Big Daddy Unlimited. Big Daddy Unlimited is like the Costco of the gun world, 99 cents for the first month. After that price goes up, is it worth it? Well, if you buy products, yes. If not, no. Of course, we have Vortex and LEX ammunition for all of your ammunition and gloves, bags, gear needs. Discount code is actually 25% off at Vortex with discount code Garand. Ladies, gentlemen, am I often forgotten, but most certainly not by me. Hellfire Missiles, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about some pretty cool optics. Before we do, I want to make a quick note. I don't like to do the same company's reviews so close together. So I know I just recently did a review on the Vortex Huey, and now we're doing the Vortex Razor HD Gen 3. And it wasn't supposed to be that way. However, I had two weapons which were scheduled ahead of this optic catastrophically fail, and they're both currently back at the manufacturer. Given that I'm kind of looking to give them a second chance here, I didn't want to publish those reviews yet. As a consequence of that, this review got bumped up by 2 weeks. It is what it is, but just understand I'm not trying to simp for Vortex or anything like that. I just want to be open and clear about that. Now, today we're going to be talking about the Vortex Razor HD Gen 3 1 to 10 power optic. Now, before we get into this, we're going to do what we always do, and we are going to do full disclosure. So what is my relationship with Vortex, and what's kind of the circumstances of this review? So, for this review, no money was exchanged and no ammunition was exchanged. I was sent two optics to do a review on, and there's nothing beyond that. The ammunition is provided for by LEX Ammunition and Big Daddy Unlimited. Big thank you to them. And yeah, so typically ammunition is provided. Vortex doesn't play that way, so that's how we are running this review. Now, beyond that, what is my relationship with Vortex? I know the people there, like them. I think they're great people. Obviously, that doesn't preclude me from being an absolute savage. I've absolutely destroyed companies, even though I'm close friends with people who work there. It's kind of a hard part of being a reviewer, but I try to be as unbiased as possible, but want to make sure that I am absolutely clear on some of those biases that might be there despite me trying to be unbiased. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the Vortex Razor HD Gen 3 1 to 10 power optic is a low power variable optic. So the question is, what is a low power variable optic? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I can actually answer that question. So a low power variable optic is an optic that goes anywhere from 1 power all the way up to 4, 6, 8, now 10. And it allows you to do a lot more than what you could typically do with, say, a fixed power optic like an ACOG, which runs at 4 power, or even just a fixed 1 power, such as an aim point or some type of reflex optic. Low power variables are very cool, and they've made absolute leaps and bounds in technology in the last 5 years. So what's kind of cool is that it wasn't so long ago, and I'm talking currently fielded and fielded in the past, marksman type optics, even sniper type optics, were 2.5 to 3.5 to 10 power. So now that we have a 1 to 10 power optic that is being run on fighting carbines and things of that nature, that is pretty incredible. And the question is if I have 1 to 10, surely it's going to be heavier, bulkier, blah, 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 compared to the 1 to 6 and 1 to 8s. And that's the first point I want to hit on, which is weight. The Vortex Razor HD Gen 3 1 to 10 power actually weighs the exact same as the Vortex Razor HD Gen 2 1 to 6 power, which was 21.5 ounces. That is crazy that there was no weight increase from the 1 to 6 to the 1 to 10 power. And as far as comparisons go, I'm going to be directly comparing the 1 to 10 from Vortex to the 1 to 8 from Night Force. And with that being said, despite it being a 1 to 10 and the Night Force only being a 1 to 8, The Night Force is only 0.5 ounces lighter than is the Vortex, which is 1 to 10. And that is pretty incredible. So we know that the weight is about the same. The question is, how does it perform? How's everything working? Is it good? Is it bad? Well, we're gonna go ahead and figure that out. So I'm gonna disappoint my Navy guys. There's no tip to butt on these optics, but we're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna get into it. We're gonna talk about the superficial features, which is what my Marines are most concerned about. So to start off with, the coating on the Vortex is excellent. I've had these for about maybe three-ish months right now, about this time, about 5,000 rounds between the two of them. And I have not really noted any excessive wear. In fact, this particular optic accidentally fell off a rock about 6 feet and then tumbled down a mountainside, about 50, well, not the whole mountainside, but about 15 feet. And despite that, it retains zero. Well, we won't get into that yet, but the finish sustained no outward damage from that. So it is a very tough coating. My main concern for the finish comes to the name. So Vortex is named the color of this finish Stealth Shadow, which I'm pretty sure is actually a villain's name from G.I. Joe. So if there's anything I could tell Vortex is, for the love of God, please have somebody else name your colors for your optics, because that is just horrible. It's just a terrible fucking name. As far as going out on the outside right here, going to the left side right here, we have our illumination dial. So how it works is we have the center for the battery cover. It uses 2032s. Pretty good battery life. We'll be talking about that as well. You pull it out, you rotate to the illumination setting that you need, and then you can push it back in and it locks it in place. Now me personally, I just leave it out and I rotate because I don't pull out. So that's how I run the illumination dial on the Vortex. Pretty simple. And what is also nice is that between each of your illumination settings, say 5 to 6 and 7 to 8, you have an off setting. So if you want it to be closest to a certain illumination setting, you can simply leave it in the off position right next to the number of illumination that you need to use. This is nice and handy. I like it compared to, say, the ACRE or various other optics that don't have this feature. So again, Vortex doing their homework, making this for shooters, and I like what they did there. Moving up to the turrets right here. So the turrets are capped. As far as the increments of adjustment, there are two different reticles that I have here. I have the MRAD and I have the MOA. Now, as far as which is better, that's going to depend on you and what you like to use. But in the terms of the MRAD is a 0.1 MRAD adjustment per click, and on the MOA is a 0.25. Now this is a little bit more precise than what you typically see from many different optics. And the reason for that is we have a 1 to 10 power optics. So I can appreciate that we have more precise adjustments. This allows us to more accurately dial in a very magnified optic, especially at 10 power. So good on them for doing that. Now, some people have noted that they wish that the turrets were exposed on this particular optic because you're getting a lot of magnification. This is something they particularly would want. Well, I mean, if you've been out in the woods or been scrambling at mountainsides with a fighting rifle, I prefer to have protection because, you fall, you eat shit, you're setting it down, you're setting your ruck down, picking your ruck up, and it's very easy to bump the adjustment on any type of rifle. Now I understand with zero stop, you can kind of click it back, but I prefer to have my turrets nice and cozy and protected by these turret caps. So I actually do appreciate how they have both the windage and the elevation capped, and that is what I prefer on a optic that is, for all intents and purposes, going to be on a fighting carbine. Now there are also zero stop adjustments, and what that means is once you have your zero set, you can back that out and put that at zero. That way, if you need to make any adjustments, you can see how far you are off on that. Awesome, right? They've done everything that you'd possibly want when it comes to the adjustment system on the Vortex optics. Now, another note is that the adjustments are very positive. You can feel the clicks very positively. It doesn't feel bad or plasticky or terrible or anything like that. The ACRE does feel a little bit more precise in my opinion, but that's just me really nitpicking. It should also be noted that the Night Force ACRE costs $2,800 to $2,900, while as the Vortex Razor as of now is costing around $2,000, maybe a little bit less already. So I'm guessing it will probably end up being maybe around $1,800 to $1,900, which is an awesome price when we compare them directly. Moving back from there, we have our magnification adjustment right here. Now, if you remember with the Gen 2s from Vortex, the ring was super freaking tight and it was really hard to turn it. That is not the case with the newer ones. It is very easy now to pull the adjustment back and forth. You don't even need the switch view, which, thank God, it finally comes with a switch view. Now, there can be some issues with using it. Let me tell you kind of my experiences right now, but it might not be the best idea to have the switch view, or perhaps change the position of where the lever is to help yourself. And what I mean by that is every time I've slung my rifle or thrown it over my shoulder, the switch view, because the adjustment is so light, it has a tendency to kind of shift. So typically push it from like 1 to 1.5. So when I bring my weapon up to my eye, I'm like, oh God, why is everything kind of fucky? And that's because it's at a 1.5 or 1.25. So it kind of pulls it back from that one power that I typically want to bring my gun up at. So with those things being said, I would likely not use a switch view if I was using this for work or anything like that, because I just don't want that getting bumped, and it is still very easy just to hit the ring itself and shift it over. So the switch view isn't necessary, but the switch view is nice. It's kind of gamey, but it definitely works very well. And I like that they finally included it. At the very back, you have your ocular adjustment. You should have that adjusted to your eye. If you don't know how to do that, there are plenty of great videos out there. We're not going to take up time talking about it, but make sure that you adjust it. Otherwise, the picture that you're getting through the optic is going to look a little fucky. So make sure that you get that set correctly. Now, before we move on, I do want to talk a little bit about the mount. A mount on an optic is just as important as the optic itself. So two mounts that I typically recommend. I recommend the ScalarWorks mount, which is not this one. ScalarWorks is excellent. I love them. They're very simple. They self-level and all that kind of stuff. And then what I have mounted right here is the Badger Ordnance Condition 1 mount. This is perhaps my most favorite mount as of now. This one is, of course, for a 34 millimeter tube, because the Gen 3 is a 34 millimeter tube. And it's at the 1.70 height, which is lower 1/3. I prefer that over the 1.54, which is your absolute. It's just a more upright head position, and it still works very well for being prone and shooting. What's very cool about this as well is built into it, it has hard points to mount an offset optic. So here on this particular weapon, I have an Aimpoint T2 mounted offset onto it. And you can buy those mounts directly from Badger Ordnance. I think it's perhaps one of the best mounts, the most ingenuitive, certainly not the lightest, but for the capabilities, I think it's very much so worth it. And again, if you don't have a good mount, your optic is not going to retain zero. But with either of those two mounts that I recommended, and many others out there as well, you're gonna have a good return to zero and a good ability to retain zero despite being harsh on your rifle as you're LARPing and doing all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we've talked about everything outside the optic. So what does it look like when you're inside, when you're looking through it? So first off, one of the first things that I look at with any optic is eye relief, right? That's the first thing you see when you bring it up. Just like the Gen 2 from Vortex, the Gen 3 has a phenomenal eye relief. And I do find that companies tend to undersell their eye relief. So Vortex gives it about a 3.5 to 4 inch eye relief. And in my experience, I found it to be much more forgiving for that. So I can see through the optic all the way from back here, all the way up just about. So there is a very large eye relief and also eye box. So the question is when I'm off center from the optic, how well can I still see through it? And pretty much I'm good to go. So you have a lot of leeway when it comes to seeing through the optic, which is important because depending on what's happening, what type of gear you have on, you might not always get a consistent cheek weld. So having a little bit of play is very nice. And that's one of the good things about red dots is, of course, that it's very easy to see through. It's very forgiving just because of the nature of them. But low power variable optics continue to get better when it comes to eye relief and eye box. Now, this, of course, isn't red dot level, but it is getting pretty dang good. Now, when I'm looking through, how does it look? And the best way to describe it is light transmission is absolutely phenomenal. I really spent a lot of time trying to not like the Vortex Razor 1-10 because I just didn't feel like, given the weight and the same size as the Gen 2, that it was possible to have an optic as good as it is. But even compared to the very venerable Nightforce ACRE, which is on the SOCOM program of record and has been used all over the world, and is well known for its ability to transmit light and see in dark environments pretty damn well, the Vortex Razor HG Gen 3 actually performs better, which absolutely blows my mind. So I had to use this a lot, but absolutely, in my experience, I have had better light transmission compared to the Nightforce ACRE, which is really saying a lot. That's some of the highest praise I can give to this optic. So light transmission is excellent. However, nothing is perfect because despite that excellent light transmission, I don't quite have as good of color. So the colors are a little bit more dull when looking through the Vortex Razor Gen 3 1-10 power compared to the Nightforce ACRE. The Nightforce ACRE is a wonderfully bright, very colorful image. The Vortex is a wonderfully bright, albeit slightly duller image compared to the Nightforce ACRE. Now, I still want to be very clear that the color representation is very much so on par with the Gen 2, which is excellent. It's just when I'm comparing it directly to the ACRE, I must note that the color reproduction is not, in my opinion, quite as good, but it is still excellent, and more than likely you're probably not gonna realize it. And on top of that, we are still comparing it to a $2,800 optic compared to this being a $2,000, $1,900 optic. As of this review, likely the price will end up dropping a little bit more. So with all that being considered, the color representation is excellent. Next thing is clarity. I did a lot of testing with various other low power available optics, anything from the Calais to the Leupold Mark 6, the Nightforce ACRE. The only optic that had better clarity than all of them was Calais, which is a phenomenally clear and just wonderful optic, but it is a bit of a delicate optic. The Vortex Razor Gen 3 1-10 power optic is remarkably clear. It has great resolution of detail. Between the ACRE, the Leupold Mark 6, and this optic, I cannot tell any difference. You can see in this video comparison, as I've been kind of putting them up throughout this video, that it's pretty hard to tell about the differences in detail between those different optics. So next we get over to powers, right? So at 1 power, the Gen 2 was well known for having a very flat, a very wide open view. So how does the 1 power on the Vortex Razor Gen 3 compare? Phenomenal. So the field of view on the Gen 3 is one of the largest I've ever seen. It's at 116 feet at 1 power magnification. That is larger than the Nightforce ACRE, that is larger than pretty much any other optic out there, and it is in fact larger than the Gen 2 1-6 power. That is absolutely incredible, the amount of field of view that they've been able to squeeze into this optic with the amount of magnification power that it has. Now that being said, I do want to note that a lot of people have said that the image is very flat and is a true 1 power. I do disagree. In my experience, I've found that the Nightforce ACRE has a flatter, more true 1 power image than does the Vortex 1-10. That being said, the 1 power is still very good. I would consider it more of a 1.1 if I'm being honest, but I think that they've done a very good job with it and it is very, very capable of being run at speed with very little problem so long as you are trained. Now the 1 power image is very flat, it is very vibrant, it has a huge field of view, but just like everything, there's nothing that's perfect. The problem for me with the 1 power on the Vortex Razor is the reticle. The reticle at 1 power is a bit too small for my liking. Without the red dot on the Vortex Razor, I find it somewhat difficult to find the reticle. Now, I'm sure if you're shooting on a range and you're in a very contrasty environment and it's a bright day, sunlight, all that type of stuff, it's not hard to find the reticle. The problem with finding the reticle comes into play when you get into more complex environments, whether that be shooting at dawn or dusk, or that be shooting indoors or what have you, but in very lighted conditions with a lot of different colors going on, it can be very easy to lose a reticle because of how fine and thin it is. Now, the Vortex Razor is of course a first focal plane optic, which means as you zoom in on that reticle as well. So I understand why they have the size where it is, but I do wish they perhaps would have taken the stadia lines and extended them and thickened them as they kind of went out, just getting a little bit thicker, kind of more similar to the Nightforce ACRE. The Nightforce ACRE at 1x both has a very true 1x, and on top of that it has a very bold reticle at 1 power that's very easy to see even if you don't have the reticle illuminated. So that is my main complaint against the Vortex Gen 3, is that without that reticle illuminated, it can be very hard to kind of find that reticle at times. Now I understand it's still, it's in the center. It's just kind of that speed thing. You just might lose it in those kind of high stress situations. As well, with a low power variable optic, I like the option of not having to run my dot on all the time. They just don't have as good of battery life as like a red dot or an EOTech. Now that being said, the battery life on the Gen 3 seems to be absolutely phenomenal, much more so than any other low power variable optic that I've used at this point. What is also nice about the Illumination is that, like on an aim point, really the only usable illumination is like 10 to 11 or 12. And almost all settings, as far as battery life concerned, are shown at 7. So aim point's battery life is not nearly as high as a lot of people make it out to be. But what's cool is with the Razor, the lower values, because it goes all the way up to, what is this right here? Because it goes all the way up to 11, even still, having it at setting 7 or 6 is still very much so usable because it's very bright, it's very easy to see through the optic and see that illuminated reticle. And I believe because it is seeable at those lower illumination levels that the battery lasts quite a long time. I have not been able to kill a battery yet. I've just been using it casually. I'm not like blasting this up at setting 11 and leaving it on for a week. But using it while shooting, using it in all those types of things, I haven't really had any issues with the batteries dying as of yet. So I will give the Vortex that. It's probably an optic that you can have the daylight setting on for like a week and be okay before you need to swap out the battery. But I just like the option of not having to have the illumination on. And again, you have to give Vortex a lot of credit because the illumination on this optic is phenomenally bright and very crisp and very clear and very easy to see. They have done a wonderful job, just like they did with the Gen 2. So big kudos to them on their illumination. I'm looking at you, EOTech, with your not so good illumination. As far as its performance in low light, in direct to sun environments, there is a sunshade that you can install, and that does come with the Gen 3 right here. So again, that's going to help alleviate a lot of those refraction issues that you're having into it. And I've definitely used it at times. It is a good thing to use depending on the environment that you're shooting in. Despite that, the Vortex, of course, suffers from many of the same problems that any optic would have shooting into the sun, looking into the sun, and that type of things. It isn't excessive. It's just something to be aware of and something that you have to work around when shooting in low light, dusk, and dawn situations. But despite that, the sunshade does work, and again, it comes with the optic, so probably something to keep on you just in case you need to use it, and that goes for any low power variable optic. Now, despite my issues with the reticle at 1 power, I will say that as you increase the magnification, that the reticle is absolutely phenomenal and superb and just well executed when it comes to the higher magnifications. My most favorite thing about this reticle is at those higher magnifications, that center aiming ring is actually semi-translucent, as you can see here in the video. That's so nice compared to pretty much every other reticle out there where that center ring or center dot or whatever the hell it is ends up obscuring your target, and it's such a pain in the ass. The Nightforce ACRE has a very, very busy reticle at its full magnification. It's actually very hard and you end up losing a lot of visual data and you can lose targets and that type of thing. I've had it happen all the time with the ACRE and it takes some training to get through. The Razor with its EBR reticle, in my opinion, is a much more intuitive and well thought out and designed reticle. They have done a phenomenal job. It has ranging. The ranging is kind of a little bit out of the reticle. That being said, it is very usable. I do prefer the ACSS from Primary Arms as a ranging reticle despite all of that. but I do really love what Vortex has done with their reticle. So the reticle at high magnifications is absolutely phenomenal. It is very easy to push this weapon all the way out to 500, 600, 700, so long as you're using a rifle that is capable and using the right ammunition that can actually reach out that far. Now, like anything, when you bump up the magnification, you're of course going to have decreased eye relief, decreased light transmission and all that type of stuff. But the eye relief at 10 power, I'm gonna pop it up right now, is still excellent. So I can still see it through it right there. That's about a full inch of eye relief in my opinion. So again, Vortex has done a great job with the eye relief and making sure that you can see through the optic and all of that type of stuff. So at magnification, the Vortex Razor is a phenomenal optic. And what's nice is I can't harp on it enough, but the positive ID, the PID capability of having a 10 power optic on a fighting carbine is enormous. That amount of range, I mean, for my guys who have served before, getting PID on stuff, using your ACOG, you guys remember doing this shit right here? So you remember how nice it was to have a magnified optic to ID and see what you're looking at. Imagine having a 10 power optic on your fighting weapon and how versatile that would make it. The Vortex Razor is incredible. They've done some very good things with it, but the biggest question is what about toughness? I have not had any issues with toughness. The Razor Gen 2 was noted to be a very tough, very reliable optic, with many people saying, quote unquote, built like a tank because it was so heavy. I think that absolutely applies to the Gen 3. And all of my time using it and all of my time dropping it and just treating it like shit, it has never once lost zero on me or had any issues or breakages or anything like that. Now, I'm sure what optics will break and I'm sure things will happen. I'm sure my Marines out there are gonna end up breaking it, but despite that, I think that the Vortex Razor Gen 3 is absolutely a work ready, is a duty ready, and is a combat ready optic that's ready for all the abuses that can possibly be thrown at it. I will say, however, that it does have some catching up to do because the Nightforce ACRE, for all of its flaws, is noted to be a exceptionally tough optic and has taken some of the worst beatings I can possibly fathom. Is the Vortex Gen 3 as tough? Maybe, probably, but that's gonna be something that's going to take time. That's not something that I, as a single reviewer, can say definitively because I don't have the amount of time, experience necessary to make that kind of note. But I think that is very promising and it will likely end up being a phenomenally tough optic. But again, its service record will ultimately have to back it up. Much like the ACOG is well known and renowned for its durability, and as has the ACRE become, so will the fire of combat and the time in service determine if the Vortex Razor is as tough as what I think it is. What else do I have to say against the optic? The only possible thing I can think of would be parallax adjustment, simply because we are getting so much magnification now that it can be nice to have. Despite that, I understand why they did not do it. This is meant to be on a fighting rifle. It's not meant to be a sniper's optic, to be a designated marksman's optic. And because of that, the parallax adjustment could introduce some other things that might cause a cascade effect in terms of toughness, reliability, and a couple other things that we've talked about. So I understand why it was not included. Ultimately, I think that the Gen 3 is the gold standard now, if we're being honest. Just like the Gen 2 set the standard for low power variable optics back when it was released, the Gen 3 is absolutely the standard when it comes to low power variable optics. 10 power is here to stay, and it's going to be the metric by which other low power variable optics are now judged. I have no doubt that other companies are likely working on 1 to 10 power optics right now, and when they come out, I will absolutely compare them to, in my opinion, what is the gold standard in low power variable optics as of right now. Does it do everything perfect? No, I think that the reticle has some things to be worked on, and the color could be a little bit more vibrant. But overall, I think we have a phenomenal optic, one that is ready. It's ready to be used at work for whatever you might need it for all purposes that the Second Amendment has intended for its citizens to use these optics. This is a great optic. You cannot go wrong with it. Is it pricey? Yes. especially compared to many of the $1,000 optics out there. It's nearly double that. But despite that, if you have this optic, you will not be disappointed in both its performance, its toughness, and its ability to allow you to stretch the legs on the M4 and AR-15 system to the very edge of its capabilities. As with everything, make sure that you budget out to have a good mount for it. Make sure that you have a good zero on it and you understand where your zero should be. We'll do videos on those later. But here's the thing. As cool and as well built as this optic is, it's not going to matter if you don't have training. Get training, ladies and gentlemen. You will suck with this optic if you do not train with it. Tons of great guys to get training from. Bear Solutions, Cogworks, Haley Strategic, probably my dad, Pat McNamara, Larry Vickers, tons of great people out there willing to train you up and get you to those levels necessary, because your mind is the weapon. The weapon definitely helps. Make sure that you make yourself as deadly as possible. That's what your forefathers intended. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. I appreciate you guys so much. Take care of yourselves. I got nothing else for you. Final thing for you guys. If you haven't already, everybody has somebody, well, not everybody, but more than likely you have somebody that has inspired you or that has helped you when you were a child. Most people do. Some people have a hard life and they never got to have those role models. If you're lucky enough to have been able to have a parent or somebody who really stuck out their neck for you and who looked out for you, I want you to take the moment, either after this video or sometime today, give that person a text, give that person an email. If they're no longer around, give them a heartfelt thought, write them a note to as far as what you could say to them if they're still around, and say thank you for what they have done for you and for your life. It's not often that we are grateful for the things that we have and for the things that we're given. It's important to remember to be thankful for those things. Remember, everybody, you are owed nothing. Work for it. Love you guys. You know, if you guys have gotten this far, we're in a rep Survival Dispatch. Survival Dispatch is a subscription-based service to get survival information. I'm a former survival guy. I teach that stuff. It's really important. Like I always say, these are facts. This is information that children used to know in the 1800s, but we've lost it due to our lifestyle. That's fine. Time to learn it again. Subscribe to Survival Dispatch. Final note to my Patreon people. Love you guys. You guys have made this channel incredible. I will never be able to thank you enough for everything that you have done for me and for this channel. You guys rock. Thank you. Take care, ladies and gentlemen.